If you have a true scary experience of literally any kind and you would like to send it my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. October is going to be a very busy month. I have a bit of a creepy story for you, Raven. One that you may be a bit surprised to find hits a bit close to home for you. No, I'm not a creep that's stalking you or anything. I just know that you live in Kansas, as you have mentioned it. And I happened to be on a job in the Kansas City area. I have to travel a lot for work doing network administration for the bank that I work for. And, fun fact, the bank that I work for has a massive data center in a city called Overland Park, just on the outskirts of Kansas City. In October of 2021, I was sent out to head up a major server upgrade for the data center out there. One thing I was a bit surprised to find was just how cold and wet the month of October can be for you all in Kansas. I was born in the South, and while we do get some cold weather, we don't get the half rain, half snow that you guys are plagued with just before Halloween. How do kids go trick-or-treating when it's so damn cold? Anyways, distracting tangents aside, the job was boring. That's not where things happened. I was back at my hotel one night, and it was, of course, raining and cold out. I had the room temp up a little warmer than I should have, but not being used to the cold, I had to. I had wrapped up some reporting that I had to deliver to my boss, so I shut off my laptop and just wanted to spend the night relaxing and doing a whole hell of a lot of nothing. So I sat up on the bed and grabbed the remote to flick through the channels. Nothing was really catching my attention, but after a bit, I landed on a documentary show about haunted places in the US. Ironically, the episode that was on was about a place called Sallie House in Atchison, Kansas. For those that don't know what Sallie House is, it's apparently this notoriously haunted house in Atchison where a young girl named Sally died. It was in the early 1900s, and she was being seen by a doctor in the house for pain in her abdomen. And they botched the appendectomy, and it killed her. Ever since then, the house has been plagued by paranormal activity, a bunch of reports of objects moving, noises, cold spots, and such. There have even been reports of physical attacks on the people that have occupied it. I was oddly drawn into this show, and maybe it's because the house was like 40 minutes away from where I was staying, but it was really interesting to me. Now, obviously watching this documentary isn't a scary story, that'd be silly. What was scary was the feeling I was getting while watching it. The whole time they were talking about the house, what happened, and walking around showing the rooms, I was getting this weird chill down my spine, and the hairs in my arm were standing up. It may sound weird, but I was feeling like I was connected to the house. Not like I knew anything about it, but like I was supposed to be seeing this episode. I'm not trying to say that this was like a past life thing or anything, but there was definitely something, I guess, paranormal about the whole thing. During the episode, I was just immensely gripped by the story. They were showing stuff about EVPs, and pictures that showed figures, and one of the people was even showing off a bruise they had seemingly randomly got while there. It was terrifying. One of the investigators even claimed to have seen Sally's spirit in the room upstairs, a little girl with a white dress that was stained in blood. He then mentioned that when he tried to get closer, she vanished. And this is where I started to get freaked out, because the second he said vanished, the TV in my room shut off. It wasn't like it was on a sleep timer or an inactivity timer or anything, because it had only been about 20 minutes. but the TV just turned off. I jumped a bit, because it kind of freaked me out given the circumstances, but I tried to turn it back on with the remote, only to find that it wasn't working. I was annoyed, obviously. I was getting into the show, and as soon as it was getting good, this would happen. I got up from the bed to turn it back on with the button on the set. The second I reached out to touch the button, I felt this cold air rush across me. And I swear on everything in my life, I felt an icy hand grab the back of my neck. Like, I felt the fingers wrap around the back of my neck and just straight up grab me. I freaked out to the point that I literally fell onto the floor as I flung myself around to see what had touched me. But, of course, there was nothing there. I literally just sat on the floor for like 5 minutes, staring into an empty room, and feeling like I was freezing. At that point, I was done, so I stood up, changed into my pajamas, and jumped under the covers. Like, completely under the covers, including my head. I didn't even turn the light off. I did fall asleep after a bit, so at least I wasn't too freaked out. The next morning, though, actually scared the hell out of me. When I got up and went to the bathroom to do what I needed to do for the day, I looked at myself in the mirror. Much to my surprise, there was a bruise on my neck, just on the side. It looked to be the size and shape of 2 fingers. It was like someone had grabbed me really hard, or hit me with their hand on the side of my neck. It wasn't a super ugly or dark bruise, but it was definitely a dark red with a blue hint, and it was very visible. Thankfully, I had a collared shirt that was able to cover it pretty well, but it was terrifying to know that whatever had touched me was real enough to bruise my skin. That was literally the only paranormal event I experienced in that hotel. Nothing else weird happened for the rest of the week that I had to stay, thankfully. I didn't watch any more TV after that, though. If I wasn't on my laptop, I was sleeping. I didn't want to risk it. Anyways, that's my creepy story that I wanted to share with you, and I thought you would find it even more interesting being so close to you. I'm pretty new to your podcast, and I love it, so please do keep up the great work. Oh, and please do let us know if you ever get the chance to check out the Sally House. It sounds like a downright creepy place. So, I want to start this story out by saying that I'm a fairly serious person. I never wanted to be a stiff, but as I've gotten into my late 20s, now early 30s, I kind of shifted into this very serious person that was always busy with work and career ambitions. My friend, Sarah, on the other hand, has always been a very whimsical person that does everything based on how she feels in that moment. And she doesn't like to be tied down. You know that one meme with the 2 girls, where one's wearing all black with black hair, and the other one's wearing tie-dyed clothes and has rainbow hair? Yeah, that's us. There's one thing that we have always agreed and have loved together, though, and that's Spooky Month. We both have this strange love for October, the hallowed season, and all things scary. There's just something about the change in seasons where the air gets crisp and starts to sting a bit that can pull me out of my serious demeanor and bring Sarah a bit closer to my state of thinking. But Sarah is still the let's do this crazy thing right here, right now kind of person, and she's my best friend. So, I'm more than willing to let her convince me to do something stupid. Especially when she comes to me super excited about it. It was obviously her idea to investigate something that she'd heard about from her brother. On the outskirts of our town, there was, apparently, an old abandoned farm that had an old barn that was still standing. There was, as there always is, rumors about this farm. This one was actually pretty messed up, and true. Apparently in the 60s, the patriarch of the house came home one day, and something made him snap. He murdered his whole family and then himself. She mentioned this, and the only thing I could think of was holy Amityville horror. I was a bit apprehensive at first, but she convinced me that we wouldn't be going into the house where the crimes happened. We would just do a quick walk through the barn to see what was there. So, armed with a flashlight and a sense of daring, we set out one Friday night to explore the barn, and perhaps get a bit of a scare in preparation for the rest of the spooky month. We got to the location. She parked off to the side of the road in a spot that was completely unnoticeable by anyone driving by, and we started walking onto the property. The barn was actually a pretty massive structure, much larger than I anticipated. And, as we entered, Sarah had this brilliant idea. She pulled her phone out and placed it on a ledge, and told me she was going to record to see if she could get any ghostly sounds. We continued on into the large wooden relic. The building was weathered for sure. Windows were boarded up. The paint was peeling away as if the walls were growing fingers and trying to reach into the darkness. We walked through the main, hall. I'm not really sure what to call the area where the stalls are for the various animals, and I will say that I was feeling very uncomfortable within a few moments. It was unusually freezing in that building. The air was stale, and everything was layered in dust, which I knew was going to kill my allergies. Then, Sarah stopped in the middle of the floor and put her hand back to stop me, and said, "Kay, did you see that?" I looked around. I hadn't seen anything, and I told her as such. She then pointed her flashlight up towards where the loft in the back was, saying that she thought she saw something moving up there. I figured she was just trying to creep me out a bit, and it was absolutely working. She glanced over at me and asked if I wanted to go up there to check it out. I was very hesitant. I started to tell her that I didn't want to, but as soon as I opened my mouth, I heard what sounded like someone talking. Not like a person that was nearby, but like something whispering something in the distance. Based on how pale Sarah got, I could tell that she heard it too, but she went a different route with her fear and started to chuckle uncontrollably. She jumped up excitedly and said that we needed to get up there ASAP to see what creepiness there was. She ran over to the ladder and started climbing it, leaving me with zero chance to tell her that I did not want to go up there. So, I followed her. Up in that loft was, well, it was genuinely unsettling. There were toys, a lot of them. All of them older and dirty, like they'd been there for decades, probably because they had. As she swept the area with the flashlight, she pointed it towards what looked like a small bundle of blankets in the corner, and in the blankets was a doll. But not like a normal doll. This thing was clearly handmade, poorly sewn together. The smile on its face almost felt malicious. It was sewn on at a weird angle. The button eyes were partially broken, and the clothing on the doll was stained with God knows what. Sarah reached over and picked the doll up to look a bit closer at it. This is where things went from creepy to, well, creepier. I turned to look around the room a bit more, looking at the other toys, the various bits of clothing that were stacked in the corner, and after a few seconds, Sarah let out a chilled scream, and I turned just in time to watch her throw the doll down and immediately dash down the loft's ladder. I followed her down to the main level, and she took off out of the barn. Thankfully, I remembered her phone and grabbed it before we left, only to see her continuing her jog out to the car. When we got to the car, I could see that she was breathing heavily and her eyes were watering. This was a stark contrast to the excitement she'd shown going up into the loft. I asked her what was wrong and what had happened as I handed her her phone, and she just shook her head and said, "We can talk about it when we get home." I didn't push it. She was clearly in a bad way, so I just put the car in reverse and took the roads back home. When we got back to my place, she finally settled down and told me what had happened. When she picked up the doll, she started to feel nauseous, like she was going to get sick. She said that I had turned away and she saw me looking over at the other things, and when she turned to look back at the doll, she saw a little girl's face just behind the doll in her hands. She told me that the face was grotesque, that she wasn't just a pretty little girl. She looked like she'd been severely beaten and injured. And the look that she gave Sarah was one of rage, like she was mad that Sarah was holding the doll. That's when she let out the yelp, tossed the doll, and ran away. That in and of itself was creepy, sure, but as we talked through it, Sarah recalled the audio recording on her phone. She grabbed her phone and we listened to see if it caught anything, and there were 2 instances that sent chills up my spine. The first was not too long after we got to the barn, and she set up the phone. There was what clearly sounded like a little girl's voice saying, "She's pretty. I hope she'll play with me." It was whispery and quiet, but that's what I swear I heard. Then, the second bit was a bit later, and it was actually right before Sarah gave her yelp. You could hear us talking in a hushed tone, and then there's a really staticky sound, like the wind was blowing over the phone. And I swear there was an angered and slightly demonic-sounding voice saying, "That's mine." And then you hear Sarah let out her scream and run out of the barn. This would have aligned right with when she said she saw the girl's face, and I'm guessing that was the girl staking her claim on the doll, even from beyond the grave. The whole event was more than enough for me. I was properly terrified. We never went back to the barn, and we decided to not really talk much about the whole event beyond that night. Thankfully, nothing attached itself to us, or followed us out of that barn, but I would be lying if I said I didn't think that was what was going to happen. It was a terrifying experience, one that even now, a couple of years later, I can remember with vivid detail. I can recall the cold feeling, the overall unsettling aura that was about the place, and that look on Sarah's face after she threw that doll. Thankfully, she hasn't had the idea to go into any more abandoned buildings, but October is only a couple of weeks away, so I'll let you know if that changes this year. I have a thing that happened to me that I'm not really sure how to categorize, but I thought I would send it your way because I know you'll have a place for it. I used to work at a really old library in my small town. It was a quaint little building that had been updated and renovated so many times that it was pretty much a brand new building. You know that old saying about replacing parts of an old ship until it's a completely new ship? Yeah, it was like that. It was a neat little place. One I was glad my town actually spent money on, because we were always busy. This was a long time ago, before the internet was a huge thing for everyone all the time, and we were one of the first public places here to actually have computers connected to the internet. Not really relevant, but it does give you a sense of place and time, I suppose. The thing about the library was that, while it was part of the town, it was built closer to the outskirts. So, the building itself was sitting there at the end of a road, with a modest parking lot out front. But behind and beside it, it was nothing but woods. Come October, the entire place was absolutely gorgeous. All the trees would turn at the same time, and would paint this picturesque scene of an older-looking building in the autumn woods. This whole thing actually happened at the beginning of October. I know this because we had just set up a spooky stories display kind of thing in the kids section, which we did on the last day of September. On this day, my coworker that helped me man the fort until close, Susan, had called in. So it was just me working the entire place until we closed at 9. Not really a complaint. It was a Monday, and I knew that we were going to be pretty slow, so I wasn't overly concerned with that fact. Around 8 p.m., I was in the main section reshelving some books when some guy walked in. He looked kind of off. Like, he seemed pretty normal at first glance, but then it kind of clicked that he looked like he was wired and breathing heavily. It looked like he'd been running to get here. Like, full-on sprint. But while wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that looked like it needed to go through the wash a couple of times to get rid of the pit stains. I eyed him as he walked in, and looked around the library from the door, almost in a panic. I stopped what I was doing and slowly approached him, asking him if I could help. When it finally occurred to him that I was talking to him, and not someone else, which took a strangely long amount of time considering we were completely empty, he cleared his throat and stood up straight like he was trying to act normal. And then, he nodded with a smile. I remember he asked me for books on folklore and religious texts, which were two things that literally no one had ever asked me for in my time working there. I motioned towards one of the back corner shelves and said that religious texts would be back there, and that a few shelves forward should be the folklore books. He thanked me and immediately made his way to the back corner. As he started walking there, I went ahead and informed him that we would be closing within the hour, so I was going to be doing a lot of sorting and cleaning, but if he had any questions to just holler out since we were empty. Then, I went back to doing what I needed to do for closing and figured that that was that. About 30 minutes later, he shouted out asking for me, and I went over to the front desk. This guy had 7 or 8 books on random folklores and copies of like 4 different religious texts. I made a joke about how he was going to be doing a lot of reading over the next couple of weeks, and he just stared at me with the most serious of stares and said, "You don't understand. What's lurking out there? I need these for my protection." A bit heavy if you ask me, but I nodded and said, "Hey, I get it. Faith can be a powerful thing." He nodded in agreement like what I had just said was the most profound thing he'd ever heard. I finished scanning in the books, scanned his card, and printed off the slip for the due dates of the books. I also mentioned to him that if he needed any of them extended for an extra week, he could call us and we could go ahead and do so, since he had so many books. He grabbed the books and looked me straight in the eyes for a moment, then, without blinking, said, "Look, you've been very kind to me, so I want to warn you. Something is out there. It only comes out in October, when the moon is hidden." I blinked a few times at him and smiled and then said, Duly noted. I hope you have a great night, and please, stay safe out there. He nodded again and just walked away from the counter and out the door with this ridiculous stack of books. I chuckled to myself, nervously thinking, wow, that was absolutely the weirdest 5 minutes of my life. But then got back to my end of shift duties. Skip ahead the rest of the hour, and I was finished cleaning up and putting books away. I hit the lights and locked the door, and then headed to where my car was parked at the back of the lot. This is where it went from, this was a weird night, to, holy crap, was that dude being serious? As soon as I put my hand on the door handle to my car, I started to hear movement in the woods behind me. I turned to look, but when I did, whatever this was jumped down behind the tree line so I couldn't see it. Now, I'm not trying to say that this was some kind of cryptid or something, but it was a weirdly shaped thing. It didn't really look like a person, but it also wasn't some kind of beast or monster. I don't know what it was. It almost seemed shapeless. As soon as I saw this thing move away from my line of sight, I got these terrible chills down my spine, like I was instinctually supposed to be afraid of it. I then glanced up at the sky, which was dumb, but when I did, I realized that there was no moon. The sky was filled with clouds, and the moon wasn't visible. At that point, all rational thought went out the window. I jammed my key in my door and jumped into the seat and sped off like a bat out of hell. I sped home, which wasn't exactly a far drive, and I ran into my house, locking the door immediately. It was the stupidest thing. There was no rationality to what the guy had said. There was no way that there was something sinister in the woods that wasn't just a possum or a coyote. But there I was, running from some possibly supernatural entity that was lurking in the woods by the library, because some rando mentioned that there was something out there. Skipping ahead to the next day, when I got to work, I obviously mentioned the whole thing to Susan, who was back after having called in the day prior. She was as confused as I was. About halfway through the shift, the man came in again, with his whole stack of books in hand. At first, I was thinking, is this going to be a regular thing? Like, is he going to end up being a stalker of some sort? But he walked up to the desk in a much calmer way, and placed the books down, and simply said that he needed to return them. I joked and asked if he had changed his mind on needing the protection. He smiled and said, "Oh, no, I was up all night reading through them, and they worked. I took care of it." After the night prior, and what he had just said, I was done with this situation. So I just scanned them all back in, put them on the cart, and told him that he was good to go. He thanked me, and simply just walked out of the library. Strangely enough, I never saw him again, and I never had any sort of experience with anything creepy outside of the library that wasn't just a random raccoon or possum. Now, I'm not saying that there was a thing that existed out there. I'm not saying that this guy was some kind of demon or spirit hunter or something. But what I am saying is that this was the weirdest thing to have ever happened. And be it a prank, or just some dude on drugs, or maybe even a guy with mental issues. It was the scariest damn thing that I had ever dealt with in my time as a librarian. So, that, my friends, was a collection of some scary October stories that take place in October. Hey look, it's October. I think I said that yesterday. Well, anyways. It is the official start, too, as the one person put it in that story, Spooky Month. It is October. It is the month where I shine. And that's right, I shine. Bright. I'm shining. I'm on fire. Please get the water. No, it is the start to the official month of the year where things that I do, get highlighted. What am I trying to say here? You know what I mean. It's the month where people like horror stuff. They like scary stuff. So, hey, look, I'm right here. Enjoy the stories. I don't know. I feel like this was a proper start to the month. It's technically the second video of October, and it's technically the 3rd of October, so it's not necessarily the start, but it's a good start. Shut up, Raven. Just stop talking. Hopefully you all enjoyed the stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. It helps a lot. If you're new to the channel and want more content like this, well, you are in the right place. Please subscribe. That helps a lot, too. You're going to be seeing me a lot this month, so get used to it. Get used to Raven. Get used to seeing Raven if you're subscribed. A lot. I'm looking at my calendar right now and feeling a bit anxious about it. I forgot what else I was saying. Oh yeah, subscribe. You can also leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts on the stories, what you thought of them, which ones you liked, which ones you didn't like, such and such. If you've ever had experience that you'd like to share, you can comment it down below. No, that won't probably get used in a video, but if you have a story you want to have used in a video, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to submit it. Or email me at astheravendreams@outlook or gmail.com. I own both of them. You can also join memberships or Patreon to get early access to content like this. That's helpful, if you so choose. It's supporting the channel a little extra. Again, never expected, but always appreciated. That's all I have to say. Anything else? Talk to my lawyer. I hope to see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And my friends, until I see you again, much love, and of course, sleep well.